but non-violent and non-sex offenses. So CDCR has basically looked at those, and even for those that have serious offenses, there are different considerations or overview that's done before they let anyone out with serious offenses. And so we want to delve into, like, what is the definition of violent offender? What is a violent offender? So by definition, to be honest, everyone on this panel would be considered a violent offender. So let me clarify that from my perspective. When I was a teenager, I committed a violent crime. I went to prison. I spent 24 years in prison. I took responsibility for my crime. I was held accountable for what I had done. And I spent a quarter of a century inside, and I worked to change myself and become the best version of who I could be. And I came home from prison, but I'm still considered a violent offender. I committed a violent act, but I am not, and I repeat, I am not a violent offender. Since being home for almost 9 years, the only thing that I've done is be a servant to my community, and that includes the community of my family that's currently incarcerated, the community in South LA, and the community in the county of Los Angeles in general, and the state of California. So violent offender means a person who has committed a violent act in their lifetime. So 30 years from now, I will still wear the label violent offender. And in some instances, if you can think of assault, just to give you a baseline, and Art and our other panelists will weigh in a little bit on this. Imagine taking a piece of paper, balling it up, and throwing it at someone, and you're angry. It's a balled up piece of paper. If that person fears for their life, that can be considered assault, which is the attempt to batter, which is a violent offense. So in those terms, everyone on this panel will be considered a violent offender. So many people in our communities come home and give back in such a positive manner. I mean, super, super, super duper positive. And I want to give examples. For instance, Art, can you share, what do you do? What have you been doing? How long have you been home? And what have you been doing with your time?
I've been home for 5 years now. I do a couple of things. So the first thing is just my personal life. I work in Hollywood, mostly in television, and I location scout for a lot of big shows. And I got into that by going through a program called Manifest Works, which is a workforce development program, 12 weeks, and trained me to become a production assistant in the film industry. Once I got my foot in the door, I worked my way up from there. I am now a producer and an executive. I'm an executive producer and a creator of a series I'm developing called Lessons from a Lifer. And I'm not here to talk about that specifically, but I will say it's just part of the work that I'm doing in my own personal life. In addition to that, as I said, I've been home for 5 years. Like you, Sam, I haven't even had like a traffic ticket the entire time I've been home. Been nothing but an asset to my community. Behind the scenes, the stuff I don't post, I mentor a lot of people. I am constantly intervening in different crises in families' lives and trying to like steer people away from crime or getting into trouble. I'm part of the board of directors of Manifest Works, so I put a lot of people with system impacted backgrounds into the program and into the film industry, which is a passion of mine. Whenever I can, I try to show up with my ARC badge on and jump in with you guys. So I'm very active in my community, and personally, and also as an asset and a mentor of someone who is coming from that background. And that's just, for me, it's like, that's the link. You have to have, and that's a part of like regret and remorse, right? Is like, I did my time, I turned my life around. And so now that change I have to pay forward because I still owe a debt to society. And I don't necessarily need to have the label to do that. So that's who I am in a nutshell.
Thank you, Mark. I'm sorry. I'm going to Mark, and I'll just call you Mark, Artie. Thank you, Artie. But wait a minute. Like you mentioned mentoring, and I remember not long ago there was a young man that you were mentoring, and you were trying to help him do something. You posted on Facebook. Could you share what you were trying to help him do?
I'm trying to think of which one specifically that was.
This was for education. You were trying to get him into education. You needed a little help.
Oh yeah, he was trying to raise money because he needed school books and other materials, and he was trying to get into college. well, specifically, he was trying to get into training to become like a fireman or a paramedic. And so we helped to generate money behind the scenes with him. And I am happy to report that he's been a very successful mentee of mine. He's now lifeguarding on the beaches of Santa Monica as he works his way into paramedic. So and Cal Fire. So very happy for him.
Thank you, Art. So I think it's important as I'm about to go to Mark and then Doris, I think it's important for people to understand that when you say violent offender that's a label, and you're basically saying that that person for the rest of their life is that. Mm-hmm. I can't see you as a violent offender. I can see that you committed a violent act as a teenager, okay? But the person that I talk to, the person that I've been around, the person that I know, and the work that you do is definitely like mentoring a teenager to get into college, and now he's a lifeguard. Do violent offenders do that? I mean, I just can't see it. Like, and I think that's why it's important for our audience to understand we have to remove that stigma, and in hopes that this group, and we will get to this even more, of people that have been convicted of violent offenses are at least considered for some of the opportunities to come home earlier than falling at 6 month to a year category. Mark, can you share some of the work that you've been doing to positively give back to our community? Like, you got out of prison, how long were you out? And now you're going back into the only super max prison in the state of California. Like,
Definitely. So immediately upon getting out the day after, I went to ARC, and there's a culture of community service within the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, which I love. So I immediately began serving my community, and then I became an intern, and then I started doing classes at Donovan with the Hope and Redemption team, and then I came out to Pelican Bay. And I knew there was a false narrative around Pelican Bay, what I talked about earlier, them being classified as the worst of the worst. Now, these are individuals who have made mistakes in their lives and ended up in prison and ultimately at Pelican Bay as a result. But we just go in there and we give these men the tools that they need to come home to their families. We teach basically character development classes. And that's a picture of our graduation that we just had earlier this year. Amazing young men in our class, and older men too, who really are going to great lengths to identify, challenge, and eradicate the belief systems they had that led them to criminal activity in the first place. And, along this journey, they have rehabilitated themselves, and I believe do not pose a current risk to society, and they shouldn't be arbitrarily excluded from the conversation when it comes time to talk about who should and should not be released from society. But I love working there. There's some amazing men confined in that prison, and I can't wait to see them come home to their families.
Doris, you've been home. Thank you so much, Mark. Appreciate the work that you do, the effort and the heart that you put into this work. Doris, you spent 39 years in prison. You just came home a month or two ago, and I'm certain you've left friends behind. Why is it important for us to be able to separate the act of a person as opposed to just labeling them as a violent offender?
First of all, these people that label us and have certain preconcepts of what we are, they're not being honest within themselves. 39 years ago, I never thought I'd be one of those people, in quotations. I wasn't in that type of atmosphere. No one in my family had ever gone to prison. Those were those people. And then I became one of those people. At first, I resented it. They have me for conspiracy to murder. If they feel or can prove, however they choose to, that you knew of something before and didn't stop it, then that's conspiracy for murder, and that's a violent offender. Once I got over my resentment at being there and preconceived ideas, which I'm sure many people out there have about people like us, I started attending class. I had life without the possibility of parole. I wasn't going to classes for board. I was going to classes for me to accept what part I did take care of, to have to take responsibility for whatever part I did play in this. And ignorance is no excuse, believe me. I cannot explain some of the people I've met in there. They were nothing but good people. A lot of them had very hard childhoods. So many women abused. Those were also people in a different category. Well, you know, we're all in the same category. It can happen to anyone. And anyone who thinks it's not true, they're being naive. We can fall in love with the wrong person. Circumstances, things happen. But once I got over my self-pity party, I started to learn and to grow, even though I never thought I'd get out. And then I can't explain to you how happy I am and how I want to give back and help people who never think they'll be in this situation to understand. And that label as violent offender, it may have been at one time, and it may have never been true in someone's case. We must do everything like they'd want to banish life without. That was my sentence until September 13th of this past year.
And how did your sentence get changed, Doris?
Now I'm going to have to give some credit to more I refer to as do-gooders. I refer to ARC that way. CCWP, California Coalition for Women Prisoners. I never wrote to them. Someone else did. They took me in. I said, oh, I appreciate it, but you're wasting your time.
So they helped you file your commutation?
They did everything. They kept after me. They said, you go and have officers and people that know you, that see you every day, what kind of a human being you are.
And did the officers document the change that they had seen while you were incarcerated?
Well, it isn't changed from violence to nonviolent. It was changed from resentfulness and being there to acceptance of sorts and bettering myself for my own self.
But did the officers write chronos to document that? And so, so with that, I kind of want to move, like, because that says a lot to where we want to go in terms of my next question that I'd like to give to both to Art. What would you say to our community members that are concerned and fearful about violent offenders being released into our community, Mark? Art, what would you say to the person who says, well, you committed a violent act and I'm afraid if you come back, you'll do it again? Like Doris just talked about the documentation that was in her file of correctional officers seeing her every day, and this helped her sentence be commuted. What should we say to the people that are fearful of people who have committed violent acts coming back to their communities?
The first thing that I would say is that we should not approach victims of crime or survivors of crime with an attitude of, I have a lack of understanding or a lack of appreciation for your concerns or your fears. I definitely share the sentiment. I have the same fears. I am a citizen now living in society. So I share the sentiment of having concerns or fears about my safety, or I could be victimized at any point in time. So I would strongly come at it from the standpoint of, I'm in this with you as well. I feel the same as a member of society. What I have been pointing out to individuals is that there seems to be a misunderstanding or a disconnect on what violent offender means and just how many of us are actually already out here. Like, there's a lack of understanding that there are over 9,000 violent offenders that we saw on that diagram that we saw earlier. 9,000 violent offenders over the past decade have been released to communities, right? Much of these individuals are long-term offenders, what they call long-term offenders or life. You want to say something, Sam?
Yeah, I just want to pause just because you mentioned it. So up on the screen right now for our viewers to see, if you look at the numbers since 2010, these are the people who had committed violent offenses that have been released. Close to 10,000 people. The total number is actually 9,000. Can't see the bottom. It's 9,154 that have been released. And the other thing that we want to point out is, like, these people have been released with a recidivism rate, Art, of what?
It's less than 1% in the first year and then slightly under 3% after 3 years, which is extremely low numbers in relation to the recidivism rate of what they would call nonviolent or non-long-term offenders, which is somewhere near 65% after 3 years. So I like to highlight this and point this out because 4 of those individuals in that 9,154 are the 4 of us on this panel right now. And what I like to say to individuals that have concerns are, we are already here. We have been here. We are your neighbors. Our children go to your children's school. We see you at the grocery stores. We work with you. There's a reason why you have not noticed that we're around. And it's because we have fundamentally transformed ourselves so much that we don't present the way that you would think that we would. We don't commit new crimes. We're nonviolent ourselves now. So we're not on your radar. We're just ordinary citizens that you don't notice every day, but we're here and we've been here.
So Mark, I want to pivot from you, Art, from you to Mark, and ask Mark. So on the point that Art just made, so how can we know this? Like, how can CDCR know? So if you committed a violent act, you're in prison, how can CDCR actually know that you won't do it again? Like, what baseline can they use for that? And I ask you, Mark, because of the work you do and every day what you see. So how can CDCR or the officials or the public know this guy's in prison? How do I know he's changed? How do I know, or he or she has changed? And before you answer that, I just want to give a shout out to CCWP for bringing Doris home, and not just Doris, but many others, and advocating for our people that are inside. Thank you, CCWP. We with you, we support you. Thank you for bringing Doris home, and many others. And the information that we also shared on our link, some of it came from Policy Link, and want to give a shout out to sharing that from Restore Justice, Adnan. Just want to give shouts out to people that are sharing a lot of this information because this is important. But Mark, could you tell us, how can CDCR be sure that a person won't commit another violent act?
Definitely. Thank you, Sam. So CDCR has access to empirical evidence and data about every individual confined in CDCR. So they have what's called a central file, which documents every self-help group you went to. It documents your education. It documents your disciplinary history. It documents if you're doing volunteer work inside the institutional setting. And this is closely monitored, right? So CDC can pull up that central file on that individual and look at how they have been conducting themselves over the course of the last, year, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, the whole time they've been in there, and see, do they pose a current threat to society? So imagine an individual who's been in prison 20 years and never has a single write-up and has earned multiple college degrees and has spent over 1,000 hours in self-help. You can safely deem this individual can successfully reintegrate into society. And that's basically what we're asking, is you look at the whole person. You just don't look at the criminal offense that landed them in prison. You look at their post-conduct as well, and then you make a rational decision and release this person in a compassionate manner.
So thank you, Mark. On that point, so in each of us, and I can only speak for me, but I know both Mark and Art very, very well, and others, when you speak about that file. So for the public to just imagine you're in prison, 24 hours a day, there are eyes on you. Correctional officers see what you're doing. They see you on your bad days. They see you on your good days. They see you when you do bad things, you get written up. But they also see you on the days when you're transforming and you become that person who's no longer a threat to society. That person who committed a violent act, but is not a violent offender anymore. And that documentation is in the C file. If a person has been disciplinary free for 15, 20 years, as Mark said, has been in rehabilitative programs, leading programs, and literally won't even think about doing something wrong, why not look in the file and say, this person right here is one of the ones that I think we should consider to go home, even though they've been convicted of a violent offense. They've held themselves accountable, they've demonstrated remorse, they take responsibility for their actions, but more importantly, they did the internal work to change the person who they were and become the best version of themselves. I want to go back to the audience real quick, because I saw hands up in the participant box. If you have questions, please go to Q&A chat box, look at the bottom of your computer screen. There's a ribbon and you can put questions in either the chat or the Q&A, and as they're sent to us, we will answer them live as we have time. Please, I'll announce that a few more times, but I want you to have an opportunity to be able to ask the questions that you have, because I've seen the hands up. And in fact, I want to pivot one more time. Here's something that I think we need to touch on that's super, super, super important. So for people, and this is a difficult question, but a needed discussion. So for people who have lost loved ones to violent crime, people who have lost loved ones, how should they feel and what should we say to them? Art.
I was really grateful and happy to see this, because here's what I would say. All right. I feel like we've been pitted against one another in a situation that doesn't have to exist in this way. We went from a very punitive system in the 90s that was made worse by a lot of the rhetoric and a lot of the politics of the time that made folks like you and I super predators and whatnot. And we ended up being thrown away at the age of 16, 17, 14. Those policies were enacted due simply to public sentiment and emotional reactivity. That's how policies like that come about. People get afraid, the fear campaigns get stirred up, and then we start seeing policy based on that. What I would say to someone now, as we have started to see a lot of transformational work being done within the prisons, is that a lot of folks are starting to come home, and we are actually seeing a reduction in crime rates, including in Los Angeles, over the last 4 or 5 years. So more have come home, but crime rate has gone down. And the reason for that is because a lot of the people who are coming home are long-term offenders who have done that deep inner work. More importantly, I don't know about you guys, I'm sure that I'm just speaking for all of us here, but there was nothing more transformational for me in my recovery, in my restoration of self, than victim awareness and victim impact classes. Coming into contact with victims of crime, hearing their testimonies was so hugely transformational for me. I mean, it had me in tears many times. And it really turned me into a person where after meeting victims of crime, I realized I can never harm someone ever again, because this is the result of it. And it radiates outwards into my community. I can no longer be a part of this, right? From that moment forward, I became an ally to victims of crime. So what I would say to them is that we are here, but we are here as your allies. We want the same thing you want. We want to see a reduction in crime. We want to see a reduction in victimization. But we need to do that together, because we've learned that punitive policies do not work. They only contribute to mass incarceration. The solution is in restorative principles that only happen when we all come together and have common sense policy initiatives that we create together.
So I want to pivot to Doris in just 1 second, but I want to put a pin in something that you said, Art. when we talk about safety, public safety, going back to the statistics that we looked at, 9,154 people that were convicted of violent crimes with a less than 1% recidivism rate in the first year, less than 3% recidivism rate in the third year. Is that what that is what you call public safety? There's the recidivism at a low, like that is the lowest category of recidivism that you can find either in this state or in this country, is in that section of people that are right now currently not being considered for release. So if we want to enhance public safety, we need to look at the people that have been doing the internal rehabilitative work, and that not only have done it, but are walking and living examples of it inside our correction system. Doris, what should we tell people that are worried about people that have committed violent offenses and that will be coming home? What do you think we should say to them?
First, when I went into prison, like I said, when I got over the self-pity, I started with my peers there, and I realized they're human beings. I was one of those that, shame on me, look down on them. I'm so ashamed, but I can't take back the past. And then I started attending different groups and met people who were, it's emotional, victims of crime and lost loved ones. And I never thought I was a sissy. I'd be sitting there at the group's, tears running down my face. And I understand both sides. I cannot explain that mostly lifers have the violent crime tag on them. And if you knew, like I knew from personal experiences, not in front of the correctional officers and staff, but talking together, how they would give anything to take back what happened. I cannot put strong enough, and how they go back, how they've missed years, decades with their children, how they want to stop the cycle, many of them, that they came from. The ones, maybe I only knew the good ones. I don't believe that. But I know these people will not go out and ever take a chance of coming back to prison. And I believe that in my heart. And I'm not naive. If I was 40 years ago, I'm not now. Please give them a chance. Don't be afraid. That's all.
Thank you, Doris. Thank you so much. We with you. We with you, Doris. We right here with you.
You understand.
From our chat, someone asked, do victims/survivors of crime have access to these files of rehabilitation? So here's the thing. During a board hearing, they can become aware of them, but they're not necessarily notified of the work that you're doing. However, you can reach out. Each institution has a survivors or victims unit, and you can reach out and ask, like, what is he doing? Like, you can ask, has he been disciplinary free? What type of rehabilitative programming has he been doing, or she been doing, or they've been doing, to learn more about, like, is this person? And you can also become an advocate for that person's release. That is totally up to you. And I want to share real quickly in a shout out to Cheryl Kaiser Ward, who Art talked about meeting people that have been survivors of violent crime. And I met Cheryl Kaiser Ward while I was incarcerated. And I call her a real superhero. And she told me that part of the way she was able to forgive what was done to her husband and her daughter was by the persons who had did it was, one, taking responsibility, being willing to be held accountable, demonstrating remorse, and demonstrating remorse in the way that they lived their life inside prison. And so, like, those are things when we take into consideration who should be considered. Take a look at the C file. Everything's in there, is documented, and we can literally look and say, you know what? This enhances public safety as opposed to threatening public safety. Want to ask a question. I want to go to you, Mark, and ask, what do you think will be the first steps for a person that wants to learn more about a person that's convicted that had harmed them or their family? What could be first steps for them to learn more about what is this person doing while incarcerated?
Definitely. I think part of it is if they reach out to the institution or the individual, right? So I had a personal experience when it comes to us on the inside. We're not supposed to reach out to anyone we traumatize, which makes sense because it may cause additional trauma. But if this individual is really wants to know what the individual is doing and they reach out first, then you can have that dialogue and you can begin the restorative principles too. And you can have a healing dialogue with this individual where you sit down at a table and you actually explain how you got to a point in your life where you committed this crime and your remorse for that crime also. I think it's very important that those dialogues happen. Just real quick, brief story. When I was at Donovan, we went in, ARC went in with Mothers with a Message. And these were all mothers who lost their children to violent acts. And they spoke to our class about that experience. And I can tell you, our class was deeply moved by that experience. That helped them in their rehabilitative journey and in their own healing process. And I think it was healing for the mothers also. But I think it's very important that we have a dialogue with each other and that we realize we're not adversaries and we want the same thing. We want public safety. We want our communities to be safe. And we're only advocating for the release of those who have done the work and no longer pose a threat.
Thank you, Mark. I'm not sure. So right now I'm going to communicate with our behind the scenes team. Not sure if you have that article available from Michelle Hennessy that was written. If you can, could you put in the chat box, put a link in, that would be great. And so this was an article that was written about what ARC does, which basically we ask anyone that we work with inside to do those things. Basically, take responsibility for your actions, be willing to be held accountable, demonstrate your remorse, because you have to think it through. You have to understand what you did and the impact that it had on your community, and do the work so that you never, ever harm another person when you're released. And so those are parts that we believe in, that we all live by. And literally the success is there are thousands. So if you think again, 9,154 people have been released from life crimes. And they have a less than 1% recidivism rate in the first year, less than 3% in the third year. These are not SAM statistics. These are not ARC statistics. These are the Department of Corrections statistics. And so that's a hugely different level of recidivism as compared to any other group. If you look in our chat box, our staff has just put in, if you take that link down, you'll be able to see even more information regarding this. One of the things I want to share too, three states have violent offender registry. So when you get out of prison, you have to register as a violent offender. California has multiple. You have gang registrations, sex offender registration. So they have 3 states currently have that. And other states are introducing legislation to implement registries for those convicted of violent offenses. All right, how is this going to create more barriers for the individuals that are transitioning out of incarceration?
This is a big problem, and I really hope it doesn't come to our state. We need to make sure that this doesn't happen anywhere else, and if it does exist somewhere else, we need to fight against it. It's very problematic. You come out, and if you are added to a violent offender registry, essentially what is happening to you is that you are being pinned with a scarlet letter that you must now carry around in society openly for the remainder of your life. It doesn't take into account the fact that lives are static, are dynamic, and they are not static. So lives change. None of us are a single moment or defined by a single moment in our histories. Sam Lewis, look at your past, look at what you're doing today. Mark Taylor, Doris, we are not our past and we are not a single moment. The stuff that we are doing today is proof that human beings change over time. And what a violent offender registry does is it says we will not take that into account. You will simply be labeled in a dehumanizing fashion and then be treated that way. So someone coming home that's on this registry is now going to have problems with housing. They're going to have problems with finding a job. They're going to have problems with, they may have certain restrictions they have to live with for the rest of their lives. Can't be near school, can't, any of that stuff. When I was thinking about violent registry, it made me think of the sex offender registry, which I also have personal problems with, just because in the sense of these registries broad stroke an entire group of people. There's no layers to it. They don't actually take into account what kind of violent offense it was. You're just simply on a registry. So you could be on a violent registry for burglaries, and you can be on a violent registry for murder. And as far as the public is concerned, it's all the same. You're a violent offender on a registry. So your life would be harmed and inhibited in the same way as someone else with different crimes. And it's really sad and shameful to me that we will have unhealthy air exposure. I can go on my phone right now and I can see in yellow or green or red what level of air toxicity is going on today, and I can make a decision as to whether I go outside or not. But you will not do that with a human life when a human life is at stake. You will not say this person is a violent offender, but this is what they did. So there's no layers to it. And that to me is just really shameful. And it's going to be very harmful if it's allowed to continue to progress across the nation.
Thank you. Thank you, Art. So one of the things that we have had in the chat box, first, real quick, Tracy, yes, we do have a ARC branch out in Inland Empire. It's ran by Wendy Staggs. Reach out to us at arcinfo.com and we can help you with that. Want to mention that we will be raising, we hope to be raising with Javier, starring some of the voices of people that are survivors of violent crime next week. That's what we hope to do. If not, we will still raise those voices. But Javier is a dear friend and someone that we respect and that has been doing this work. Just want to put that out there. The other part that I had, a few people have asked in the chat box, how can they help their loved ones that have done all of this rehabilitative work, but are not being considered for the opportunity to come home? Write your electeds. Ask your loved one to make photocopies of all the things that they've done and send a packet to your electeds. Trust me when I tell you, you're voting public. Write to them. Tell them, 20 years ago, my son, my daughter, my family member committed this crime. That's not who that person is today. And here's the documentation that's in the files of the Department of Corrections for you to be able to verify that. So for you who want to help your family members, write your elected, write the governor. Don't think that when you do this, it does not matter. It counts, trust me. We do quite a bit of advocacy work here at ARC. We've been instrumental in co-sponsoring 17 pieces of legislation that have incrementally made our justice system more equitable. And we hear from electeds all the time that the power of the written word is there. So please empower yourself and write on behalf of your loved one. Like to take a minute and ask Doris, any closing thoughts you want to share with the people that are listening?
I'll try to make it quick. I'm 81 years old. I could have gotten out and just been taken care of, okay? This is so important to me, to give back, to do back. These people, ARC, the CCWP, and I'm sure many others I don't know, they do so much work, most of it volunteer. Anyone who works for these organizations is not in it for the money. If they get paid, believe me, it's not enough. It's so important. And I have such a passion. I'm working on being in ARC officially, and I want to go to Sacramento. And if they can look into my face and my eyes and not believe me, there's something wrong there. That I cannot, I wish the public would not think that these people are here to pamper us. They're here to encourage us and help us be good citizens. By the way, everybody who can vote should vote.
That's right.
That's how I feel. It's
That's
an
right.
honor, a privilege, and I hope vote the right way. No, whatever you vote is right for you. I promise not to start that. But I'm telling you, if the people out there only understood, truly understand what you people do, they'd be throwing things at you to help. That's it.
Thank you, Doris. Thank you again.
But
Welcome home.
that's from my heart, not my mouth.
Thank you. And welcome home again, Doris. It was a pleasure to meet you when I was there last week. You, just so you know, you're already part of the ARC family. They have some minor stuff that they require you to do, but you're part of the ARC family. And CCWP,
I'm honored. Both ways goes. I remember who does for me. I remember well, and I'll do back by choice. That's it. I promise not to overtalk. I'm fighting to behave.
Okay. Mark, closing. Thank you, Doris. Mark, closing thoughts for our audience.
Definitely. We have too many people in prison in the state of California and in this country. We currently have in our state alone, approximately, I believe the number is 99,000 people in prison, which is far too many to keep health and safety from this virus. We need to get our brothers home, our sisters home. We've already lost 51 human beings to this virus. And the only way we win is by getting our brothers and sisters home. Time is of the essence. We need to do whatever it takes to get them home so they're safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Art, last thoughts for our audience?
I want to say thank you so much for having me and for the invitation here. I want to point something out. Justice is not vengeful, okay? Justice, true justice, is accountability with the intention of restoration of self. That is what justice is. So that is a process that we all took part in, and I want people to be aware of that. We need to continue to put pressure on politicians and on the California Department of Corrections to continue to release individuals. We just talked about a whole thing here about the process of evaluating individuals and determining who should come home and, and all that good stuff. I want to point out that 99% of my rehabilitation was handed to me by people you would call violent offenders. 99% of it was done in inmate-led groups, what we call inmate-led groups, right? That helped to transform me. And there are so many of them who are still incarcerated right now during the COVID crisis. So we can enact change. We have political power ourselves out here, and we all need to come together. And that is victim and offenders. We can all come together and have common sense approaches to these problems. And I look forward to being a part of that solution. Thank you all.
Thank you, Art. I want to take a few minutes to share some other information with our audience. As people are being released in mass numbers from the Department of Corrections, ARC in collaboration with a number of other organizations. If I miss you, I apologize, but I just want to shout those organizations out that are working to help people find housing, provide transportation, and give support. So I want to give a shout out to Amity, A New Way of Life, CEO, Center for Employment Opportunities, Choices for Freedom. I want to shout all of you out for working together and helping. Re-Evolution, Heshima, all of these organizations, all of us are none, that are literally out there picking our people up from the institutions, providing transportation, providing housing, providing support. So just know, for the audience to know, actively in the community, community-based organizations are working to help. I also want to give shout out to the philanthropic community that has reached out to organizations and CDCR and the BSCC to make sure that there are funds that are being made available to help people that are transitioning out. Just so you know, this is a huge effort that takes a lot of organizations, both community-based and governmental organizations, to make sure that people that are being released are transported in a safe way and that they are actually being brought home or to transitional housing from institutions. It's not a perfect system, but we're working to make sure that we improve it. But just know, I want to shout out those organizations. Place for Grace is another I almost forgot. I don't want to get in trouble again. If I don't shout your organization out, know that we're working together to help our people come home safely. CCWP, the women's voter leagues. If I don't shout you out, just know that I'm aware, and I want the public to be aware that there are community-based organizations that are working every day to make sure that people are transitioning safely and providing services to the people that are coming home. So just want to shout that out to our community and let you know that we're here. We're in this together. And that's not just a phrase. Literally, we're in this together, and we need to make sure that the people that are coming home are safe, our communities are safe, and that we save lives. I want to thank you all for joining us. Next week, we will be lifting the voices of people that have survived violent crimes. I'm hoping that Javier is listening. I have not got a response for him, but Javier, I'm putting you on blast. We want you on the show. We want you to be able to share the work that you're doing and elevate that so people know that we do believe in one community, a collective community that has restorative justice. That's a major center component to it. Thank you. Take care. God bless. And see you next week.